Paris, France, home to the Louvre Museum and the most famous portrait in the history of art, Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa. Her enigmatic smile continues to mystify the more than 6 million people who visit each year. But is it possible that Leonardo painted 2 Mona Lisas? Could it be that 500 years of rumours about the existence of another Mona Lisa are actually true? To answer that question, we go to Florence, Italy, where it all began. Francesco del Giocondo was a successful silk and cloth merchant and a respected political figure who met Lisa Gherardini shortly after her family moved from here. A year later, in March of 1495, the couple was married. Perhaps it was here, in the Santissima Annunziata, that the doting husband visited Leonardo in his studio and commissioned what would become Da Vinci's most celebrated work, the Mona Lisa. 40 years earlier, just outside of Florence, near the town of Vinci, Leonardo was born. The town boasts a museum dedicated to the life and work of the great master, the Museo Ideale Leonardo da Vinci. Its director, Professor Alessandro Verzosi, is one of the world's leading experts on Leonardo and the Mona Lisa.
For years I have been looking for a different version of the Gioconda from the one in the Louvre. And I'm looking in order to clarify to myself and others the idea of 2 different paintings.
Leonardo's custom of executing more than one version of some of his greatest works has long been accepted. Well-known examples of this include the Virgin and Child with St. Anne, the Madonna with Yarn Winder, and the Virgin of the Rocks.
So 2 versions of the Mona Lisa is consistent with other artworks by Leonardo where he did execute 2.
But if Da Vinci did paint 2 Mona Lisas, wouldn't there at least be some evidence?
What is fundamental is to remember the exact testimonies of the witnesses. After the discovery of the Heidelberg document, several possibilities were reinforced, and there were some precise indications.
In 2005, this document was discovered in the library at Heidelberg University in Germany. The notes in the margin were made by Agostino Vespucci, relative of the famous explorer Amerigo Vespucci.
The significance of Agostino Vespucci's account is that in reality he was likely to have been the very first eyewitness to have actually seen Leonardo working on the portrait of Lisa del Giocondo.
Vespucci's notes refer to a style of Leonardo's which was becoming popular among artists at the turn of the 16th century.
There was a great similarity between Leonardo and the ancient painter Apelles, the ancient Greek artist who had a habit of leaving his works unfinished. Vespucci signs his comment in October 1503, and that dates the period when Leonardo must have been working on it.
Famous Florentine painter, architect and biographer Giorgio Vasari wrote extensively about Leonardo's life and devoted more description to the Mona Lisa than to any other painting by Da Vinci. In his book, Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors and Architects, which was published in 1550, 30 years after Leonardo's death, Vasari confirms Vespucci's account.
And it begins by saying, Leonardo undertook to execute for Francesco del Giocondo the portrait of his wife Mona Lisa, and after he lingered over it for 4 years, he left it unfinished.
But the Mona Lisa in the Louvre is clearly a finished painting. The now famous travel journal of Antonio de Beatis details his visit to Leonardo with Cardinal Luigi of Aragon, a meeting which did not take place until October of 1517, exactly 14 years after Vespucci had noted Leonardo working on the earlier portrait.
The document of De Beatis that contains the very words that Leonardo da Vinci said to the Cardinal of Aragon is fundamental.
It was written that Leonardo showed them a number of paintings, including one of a Florentine woman done from life at the instance of the late magnificent Giuliano de' Medici. It starts to become apparent that there were two separate commissions, one for Francesco del Giocondo of his wife Mona Lisa, and another one for Giuliano de' Medici.
De Beatis and the Cardinal were shown 3 paintings that day, which De Beatis referred to as perfettissimi, meaning finished.
Most historians and scholars agree that the painting that the Cardinal of Aragon and De Beatis was shown in France in 1517 is the painting that is today in the Louvre.
Not only is the Louvre version a finished painting, but it was finished with a particular glazing technique, a technique which Leonardo only developed after his return to Milan in 1508.
On the basis of these important facts, there is a clarification, presumably, regarding the chronology.
The histories of documentation were running along, as it were, 2 separate tracks that never would meet.
Perhaps even more compelling is this 1504 drawing by the artist Raphael, which he composed when he visited Leonardo in his studio in Florence.
One of the clues to all of this is Raphael's pen and ink sketch shows a young woman sitting on a balcony and flanked by columns on each side. His sketch, now in the Louvre, is considered by most scholars and experts to have been based on Leonardo's Mona Lisa.
In fact, some of the earliest copies of the Mona Lisa had columns, including the one in the Oslo Museum. But the Mona Lisa in the Louvre did not have columns in its original composition, and according to a recent publication by the museum, the painting has never been cut. Giovanni Paolo Lamazzo was one of the most respected art historians of the late 1500s. In his 1584 treatise on painting, he clearly refers to 2 different works when he states that Leonardo had painted the portrait of La Gioconda and of Mona Lisa.
I believe it is more than possible that there existed 2 pieces of art.
But if there is another Mona Lisa, what could have happened to it? Though a painter himself, renowned art critic and curator of the Holborn Museum, Hugh Blaker was far better known as an art dealer and connoisseur, with a discerning eye for works by the great masters. Blaker was more than familiar with the clues dating back to the early 16th century. He too believed in the 2 painting theory. Bath, England, 1913. Hugh Blaker makes a heart-pounding discovery in the Somerset home of an English nobleman. There he finds the painting he'd spent the past decade searching for. A portrait he recognizes instantly as the work of Leonardo da Vinci, his earlier Mona Lisa. Blaker's paintings certainly fit with the works Raphael had completed several years after the sketch he made of Leonardo's Mona Lisa, like Lady with the Unicorn.
Beyond Raphael and beyond everything that derived, one interesting point is that of the two columns. It seems this one is the first possibility of what Raphael interprets as the woman on the balcony in the first years of the 16th century.
Aside from the columns, it was also plain to see that the painting had been left unfinished, like the one mentioned by Giorgio Vasari and Agostino Vespucci.
On the basis of the knowledge acquired to date, and seeing the characteristics and the documents, this unfinished Mona Lisa, above any other, seems to be the most compatible with what was written.
Without hesitation, Hugh Blaker bought the Mona Lisa that fateful day in Somerset in 1913. He paid a modest price to a nobleman whose family had owned the painting for nearly 150 years. Blaker brought it here to his studio in the London suburb of Isleworth, where it became known as the Isleworth Mona Lisa. Delighted to have made such an amazing capture after searching for so long, Blaker was eager to share the news with the rest of the world, but he would have to wait. With the outbreak of the First World War, Blaker feared for the safety of the painting and knew he had to get it out of Europe. He shipped his masterpiece to America, where it was hung in the private offices of the Boston Museum of Fine Art. In 1922, after the war was finally over, Hugh Blaker at last had the chance to send his painting to Italy, where it could be examined by some of the greatest Leonardo experts living at the time. A time when connoisseurship was the only way to determine a painting's authenticity. And the connoisseurs agreed. Experts like Professor Lorenzo Ciccone, curator of the Academy of Santa Luca, who said, "For me, this is an original of Leonardo." Mr. Ludovico Spiridon, one of the most prominent Italian art collectors in Europe at the time, stated, "The face has been painted by Leonardo, no doubt of this at all. It is most beautiful." Professor Adolfo Venturi, a well-known art critic and historian, said Blaker's Mona Lisa was more beautiful than the Paris one. And Dr. Giulio Cantalamessa, chief director of the Borghese Gallery in Rome, and a great authority in the art world, said, "This is the best Mona Lisa that I've seen." In 1926, Blaker's stepfather, well-known English art historian John Eyre, published The Two Mona Lisas. But the book was in short supply and poorly distributed. John Eyre said of the Mona Lisa, "The Isleworth masterpiece will be acknowledged someday as the Gioconda's version. I've not the shadow of a doubt." Sadly, Hugh Blaker would not live to see the earlier Mona Lisa earn its deserved place in the canon of Da Vinci's work. In the years following his death, Blaker's painting was exhibited at the Leicester Galleries in London. That was when publisher and old master and print dealer Henry Pulitzer first set his eyes upon it. He was instantly spellbound by its beauty. Over the next 26 years, Pulitzer sold his entire Kensington estate with all of its contents and most of his art collection in order to acquire Blaker's Isleworth Mona Lisa. In his 1966 book, Where is the Mona Lisa?, Pulitzer neglected to provide the conclusive scientific evidence that the world's experts and critics had been hoping for. Earning their support without it would have been next to impossible.
To give new attributions, like Venturi, a very important art historian, used to say, if one talks about Leonardo, it's as if one is taking in one's hand a burning iron rod.
I think many of the scholars who do attributions and things, sometimes they get burned.
Henry Pulitzer passed away in 1979, but shortly before his death, he had the Mona Lisa locked away in a secured bank vault in Switzerland, where it would remain for nearly 4 decades. But how, when so many experts believe this painting to be the work of Da Vinci, could it remain to this day relatively unknown.
This Mona Lisa was not visible. It had to be looked for, and it remained in secret, notwithstanding some publications and attributions.
With the dawn of the 21st century began the most rapidly advancing technology the world has ever known. There are major innovations in tools for scientific analysis, and now there is, for the first time in history, the necessary technology to properly examine this Mona Lisa. Can science at last succeed where connoisseurship has failed? In 2004, the Isleworth Mona Lisa was removed from its security vault and entrusted to world-renowned art auctioneer David Feldman.
I was to prepare everything I could about the painting in a very logical and organized way, relating to the research, relating to any scientific examinations and studies.
Feldman, together with respected Zurich banker and lawyer Dr. Marcus Frey, formed the non-profit Mona Lisa Foundation.
The goal of the foundation is to come out with the facts about the two-painting theory.
Direi che il lavoro di Mona Lisa Foundation è anche importantissimo.
The work of the Mona Lisa Foundation is very important because it does not express a priori judgment.
Over the next 12 years, the painting underwent every test, from gamma spectroscopy to infrared reflectography and multispectral digitization. UC San Diego research physicist Professor John Asmus has specialized in art conservation for the past 40 years. He's one of few people alive today who has examined both the Louvre Mona Lisa and the earlier version.
Well, I spent months of my life staring at these two versions of the Mona Lisa, and it occurred to me that there were many, many similarities that were not just similarities by chance, and it suggested to me that Leonardo's hand, at least in the designing of the composition, may have been evident in the Isleworth Mona Lisa.
Leonardo's love for painting was only outmatched by his passion for mathematics. The foundation applied this thinking to their own very innovative test and uncovered what they call Leonardo's hidden technique.
The earlier portrait is actually larger than the version in the Louvre. As you can see, with these simple horizontal lines drawn across both paintings that have now been brought to the same ratio, elements in each one fall in exactly the same place. Only the same artist could have known how to do that without the benefit of modern technological aids. The eyes, the nose, the distance between the top of the skull and the chin, all of those are in exactly the same location in both paintings.
But a glaring inconsistency is the obvious age difference between the woman in the two paintings. Lisa del Giocondo would have been in her early 20s in 1503 and in her mid-30s by 1517.
There are people who are saying the Mona Lisa in the Louvre was one age, and other historians were saying, but this evidence suggests that it's another date.
Talking about two pieces of art, one, according to the document of 1503, surely is the unfinished portrait of Mona Lisa Gherardini. The other is the painting of the Louvre, and it's possible that it was also Lisa Gherardini, but done for Giuliano de' Medici.
Considering Da Vinci's incredibly advanced mind and unparalleled knowledge of the human anatomy, the Foundation theorized that Leonardo may have age-progressed his earlier Mona Lisa by more than a decade to complete the Louvre version.
One of the fundamental points of historical and artistic studies is that we must formulate new hypotheses and get results from new research.
The Foundation approached esteemed forensic artist Joe Mullins, who trains the FBI on 3D age progression and teaches skull reconstruction here at the prestigious New York Academy of Art.
project was presented to me as a age regression of the Louvre Mona Lisa, and I was asked to take that image and age regress it back 10 to 12 years. First step was basically giving her a digital facelift, using Mona Lisa as a foundation to build on, finding models with Mona Lisa features, use them as kind of an array of body parts and combine all those pieces. You can see it building up. The Mona Lisa Foundation then sent me the earlier Mona Lisa, doing a comparison, a side-by-side, an overlay, split my age regressed image of the Louvre Mona Lisa and put it on top of the early Mona Lisa. Everything fell right into place. It matched up like they were mother and daughter. If you were to show the earlier Mona Lisa to 1,000 people, 1,000 people are going to say, that's Mona Lisa.
I feel very privileged to have been able to work on this painting. The painting is part of a huge mystery, and the two versions in my mind really resolve many of the conflicts that have to do with problems in the history of these two paintings.
And now, the pieces of a puzzle more than 5 centuries in the making fall into their place in history, and the scientific proof is finally available to the world.
Even more than the emotion, I found a character that was inviting me into a dialogue with her gaze, and with that certain smile.